Hey heathens! Another deconversion story for you. This one coming to me from jhg1964, a new subscriber of mine. And he sends me this message and says, I agree in part to your assertion that education plays a large role in the giving up religion and the belief of God, but for me at least, there were a couple of other factors that came together to make it possible. First of all, I can counter the pest in your inbox who says we atheists have some grudge against gods, our parents, etc. I grew up in a very normal household with very loving parents who took me to Sunday school and church every week. Like you, I grew up in the Bible Belt, Baptist in my case. When I was about 8 years old, I remember going to Sunday school class full of excitement and wonder that the human race had set foot on the moon, and that I personally got to watch them drive their dune buggy around live on television. But my Sunday school teacher, Gertie, had other ideas. She said them fellers didn't need to go to no moon, them fellers didn't go to no moon. That's just something they did they put on TV to fool folks. Sorry, totally screwed that up, and it's a very important part. I'm gonna try it again. Them fellers didn't go to no moon. That's just something they put on TV to fool folks. There, a little better. Alright, Gertie was obviously a misguided old fool, and I in no way hold all believers up, or is it down, to her standard. But I thank her to this day for starting me on the path towards critical thinking. Here is factor number one in my deconversion. At age 8, I truly cared about how the universe worked, and I marveled at the natural world. The idea that men were driving on the moon made perfect sense to me. So when good old Gertie claimed otherwise, that the heavens were for God and not astronauts, I wondered what else she might be confused about. She probably wished she'd never made such a claim, because after that she had to answer questions about the logistics of heaven, who Adam and Eve's children married so they could have more kids, how all those animals fit on one boat, how God could have screwed up so royally in the first place. Basically all the questions she had no answers for. That wasn't enough to stop me from being baptized, however. Around age 10, I pried my fingers off the church pew in front of me, and under the threat of eternal hell, fire, and damnation, was born again, John the Baptist style. The local river tended to sweep the newly repentant away before they could be saved, so we played it safe and did it in the local cattle pond. I don't recall whether it felt like salvation, but I know it provided a profound, if sticky, relief. In the decade that followed, I think it was a cumulative effect that chipped away at my faith. I had been born into a moderate sect of Protestantism that worshipped Had I been born into a moderate sect of the Protestantism that worshipped the God of the gaps, it might have taken me longer to chase God into a corner and make him disappear, but my God was nothing so nebulous. Mine was an all-or-nothing, take-it-or-leave-it kind of God, and everything I learned in my astronomy and physics courses took a chink out of him. Even without science, I grew to dislike the idea of a God who would allow his creation to get into such a sorry state. More importantly, and I'm sure believers will jump on this as arrogance, but I'm just being honest, I asked myself, if I were God, what would my rules be for getting into heaven? They had more to do with good-heartedness than with blind subjugation. I thought of the man who lives a lifetime of sin and gets a last-minute reprieve simply for accepting Jesus as his Savior. I compared him to the non-believer who lived a good life without significantly harming anyone, And I heard God tell the latter, sorry buddy, you were a good man, you lived a good life, you loved your wife and children, and tried to do your best for those around you, but you didn't do it in my name, so you'll have to burn in hell. This idea repulsed me. By way of simple fairness, I began to see an arrogant and narcissistic God, not a Savior. And the crux of it was John 3:16, for God so loved the world, whosoever believeth in him shall not perish. My response came to be, if I did the crime, I'll do the time. Nice. And in the end, I really didn't feel all that sinful. At risk of blindness, sure, but innately sinful. The final phase of my transformation was the acceptance of what I already knew in my heart. Like so many others, I clung to belief in God because of the promise of an afterlife. Letting go of eternity is not an easy thing to do. Just ask Dick Clark. The idea of never looking again upon the faces of one's children is even harder. It was the Book of Contact by Carl Sagan that somehow let me get past that. I began to see myself as part of the cheesy circle of life in the Lion King movie, and somehow that got the ball rolling. Finally, I found something so much more important to me than my own welfare or God's fragile ego. It's my 4-year-old son. I discovered that I never drew a breath beyond it, that if I never drew a breath beyond today, it feeds my own fragile ego to know that he'll still be around and maybe even remember something about his old dad. That's the most important thing in my world. So, there you have it from JHG, and I think that is a beautiful story and a beautiful deconversion, and great for the whole idea of just, looking at life as it is and what's so important, Good story, man. I enjoyed it. Both for the first time I read it and when reading it now. Truly enjoyed it. Great story.